Well, more and more, seeing as more and more aspects of life is being observed electronically, either from surveillance devices or other people's cameras or glasses or mobile phones, then more and more of this stuff pops up and it becomes more of an issue based on the way we behave with technology. So again, there are a number of solutions to that problem, but yes, it crops up more and more. As more people use what would normally be used inside an organisation, inside the office, is now used mobile, then you're using it on public transport, in restaurants and this sort of thing. Yes, the more and more chances to be overlooked. Therefore, you have to, one, make it easier for the individual to act confidentially, but another part of it is behaviour. So if you have your financial reports on a mobile device that is confidential, then realistically you probably shouldn't be using it in a public place. But you can put a glass over it, you can adopt relatively straightforward behavioural techniques to cut down the risk. But in certain situations, maybe the rule should be, you don't use that. But that leads on to another area of identity management, which is if you restrict that information that you regard as confidential to only the people that should have access to that information, then those individuals are more easy to control because they will understand the value and confidentiality of that information and they'll enforce the rules themselves. When you give it to all and sundry, yes, you're running a risk.
Companies spend millions of pounds on protecting firewalls and on complex, expensive IT security solutions, and then quite often overlook the really, really simple things that can go wrong. 3M recently conducted a visual hacking survey where a covert visual hacker went into organisations in the US. The amount of data and information that they gathered was terrifying, with over 50% of that being gathered from people's computer screens.
The information being seen over the shoulder, it's a small screen, so the content is relatively small. The key piece of information that people can steal is the logon credentials. It's the username and password. That is the most valuable information that you put on the phone, and that's what you need to protect. An attacker who gets hold of that information can get onto your corporate information systems, and then they've got access to far greater information and in a much more convenient way than having to look over your shoulder on the train.
On-screen data being viewed by other employees is a problem, but that's something that you need to think about in terms of how you organise your office spatially and having the right level of physical protections for employees with access to that kind of data.
I'm endlessly surprised what you can see on people's screens in the train and in a coffee shop, or what you overhear. One of my colleagues takes snapshots with his phone of what he can see on screen. He's got quite an interesting collection. People should really be a little more careful about what they do in public places.
I think it is definitely an issue. I think in the context of the way people work nowadays on planes, on trains, in public, these issues definitely come up. In some ways, it's not actually a new issue. In the old days, if you went back 40 years, you could look over someone's shoulder and look at the papers they had printed out and read. But that was an issue then too, and I think that it remains an issue. The biggest issue in computer security, though, is probably more the risk that someone grabs large amounts of data rather than just something that they view off someone's screen, but it is a real concern.